I watched my sister's hands shake as she gripped the edge of the witness stand. Those same hands had held my inhaler above her head 15 years ago, dangling it just out of reach while I collapsed on our kitchen floor, my lungs screaming for air that wouldn't come. Today, in this courtroom, those hands trembled as the prosecutor asked her to explain what happened that summer afternoon when I was 14 years old and she decided my life was worth less than winning an argument. But I need to take you back to the beginning, to help you understand how we got here. My name is Lennox, and I was born fighting for every breath. Severe chronic asthma, the doctors told my parents when I was 3 months old. The kind that meant hospital visits were routine, that meant my childhood bedroom looked more like a medical supply closet than a place where a kid should grow up. Nebulizers, peak flow meters, 3 different types of inhalers, each one color-coded for a specific purpose I had memorized before I learned my multiplication tables. My sister Davina was 18 months older than me, and from the moment I can remember, she resented the oxygen I consumed. Not in a way anyone else would notice at first. She was careful, calculated even as a child. In public, around our parents, she played the concerned older sister perfectly. But alone, when it was just the two of us, I saw the real Davina. The one who looked at my nebulizer treatments like they were a personal insult. The one who sighed dramatically every time I had to sit out during family activities because my chest felt tight. "Why do you always have to ruin everything?" she asked me once when I was 7 and she was 8. We were supposed to go to an amusement park, but I'd had an attack the night before and Mom wanted to reschedule. "I didn't do it on purpose," I whispered, my throat still raw from coughing. "You never do anything on purpose, Lennox. That's your whole thing. Being the victim everyone has to tiptoe around." I didn't know how to argue with that. How do you defend yourself against accusations about something you can't control? So I stayed quiet, and Davina learned that her words had power over me. Our parents, God bless them, tried their best. But they were exhausted. Raising a medically fragile child takes a toll that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. Every cough becomes a potential emergency. Every seasonal change means adjusting medications and watching for triggers. They loved me, I know they did, but they were stretched so thin that they didn't always see what was happening right in front of them. Davina learned to work within those blind spots. When I was 10, she started moving my rescue inhaler. Small distances at first. From my nightstand to my dresser. From my backpack to the bathroom counter. Never far enough that I couldn't find it, but always just far enough to make my heart race with panic for those few seconds of searching. She'd watch me scramble, my breath already getting shorter from the anxiety of not knowing where it was, and she'd smile this tiny smile that never quite reached her eyes. "You really should keep better track of your things, Len. What if you had a real emergency?" The cruelty of it didn't register with our parents when I tried to explain. They saw it as typical sibling annoyance, as Davina just being a little thoughtless. They'd tell her to stop, but there were never real consequences. A gentle scolding, maybe. A reminder to be more considerate. But never anything that made her actually stop. So she didn't. By the time I was 12 and she was 13, the pattern was firmly established. I was the fragile one, the sick one, the one who needed constant accommodation. Davina was the healthy one, the athletic one, the daughter who didn't require emergency room visits or daily medications or special considerations for every single activity. I heard her on the phone once with a friend, talking about me like I was a burden she'd been unfairly assigned to carry. Honestly, having Lennox as a sister is like having a really needy pet. Everything revolves around whether she can breathe properly or not. My parents literally plan their entire lives around her lung capacity. Do you know how insane that is? I was standing right outside her door. She knew I was there. She wanted me to hear. The summer I turned 14 was brutal. The heat made my asthma worse, the humidity turning every breath into work. I spent most of June and July inside, in air conditioning, trying to avoid triggers. Davina spent those months growing more resentful, more angry that her summer plans kept getting adjusted around my limitations. "We can't go to the beach because Lennox might have an attack." We can't go hiking because Lennox can't handle the exertion. We can't do anything fun because Lennox. She said this at dinner one night, her voice sharp with frustration. Mom sighed. Davina, that's not fair. Your sister can't help. I know she can't help it. That's the problem. She'll never be able to help it, which means my entire life has to revolve around her problems forever. Dad intervened then, suggesting Davina could do things with her friends without us, that she didn't have to always include me in her plans. But that wasn't what Davina wanted. She didn't want independence. She wanted me to stop existing as an obstacle. The day it happened was a Thursday in late July. Temperature outside was pushing 95 degrees, humidity making the air feel thick as soup. I'd been inside all day, staying cool, trying to keep my breathing steady. Davina had 3 friends coming over, girls from her freshman class who I recognized but didn't really know. She'd made it very clear that morning that I was to make myself invisible. I'm serious, Lennox. Stay upstairs. Don't come down. Don't even breathe loud enough for them to remember you exist. It's my house too, I said quietly. Her eyes went cold. And I actually have a social life. So do us both a favor and pretend you don't exist for a few hours. I went to my room. I put on headphones. I read a book and tried to ignore the sounds of laughter coming from downstairs. I was good at making myself small by then. I'd had years of practice. Around 3 in the afternoon, I got thirsty. Our house had 2 bathrooms but only 1 kitchen, and I needed water. I wasn't trying to intrude or interrupt. I was just thirsty, just human, just trying to take care of my basic needs in my own home. I came downstairs as quietly as possible. Davina and her friends were in the living room, clustered around someone's phone, laughing at something I couldn't see. I slipped into the kitchen, filled a glass from the tap, tried to be invisible just like she'd asked. Is that your sister? I heard one of the girls ask. Davina's voice carried into the kitchen, that particular tone she used when she was performing for an audience. Yeah, that's Lennox. The one with all the medical drama. Another voice, curious but not unkind. She looks normal though? Oh, she's fine most of the time. She just has asthma that she milks for literally everything. Watch, she probably can't even walk upstairs without needing her little puffer. My hand tightened on the glass. Heat flooded my chest, and not the kind that came from my lungs. This was pure anger, the kind I usually swallowed down, but today something in me snapped. I walked into the living room. Stop talking about me like I'm not here. Davina looked up, surprise flickering across her face before settling into irritation. I thought I told you to stay upstairs. I live here. I can get water in my own kitchen. Great. You got water. Now go back upstairs. Not until you stop telling people I'm faking my asthma. One of her friends shifted uncomfortably. The other 2 watched like this was entertainment, like my humiliation was something interesting happening to break up their boring Thursday. Davina stood up. I didn't say you were faking. I said you milk it for attention, which is different. No, it's not. You're telling people I'm exaggerating a medical condition. Do you have any idea what that's like? To have your own sister act like you're making yourself sick on purpose. Maybe if you didn't make such a big deal out of every little wheeze. It's not a little wheeze. I have chronic severe asthma that could literally kill me if I don't manage it properly. Oh my God, see? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Everything is life or death with you. Everything is an emergency. You're so dramatic about every single thing that happens to you. My chest was starting to feel tight. I could feel it beginning, that familiar constriction, my airways responding to stress the way they always did. I tried to take a slow breath, tried to calm down before it got worse. Davina saw me trying to regulate my breathing, and her expression shifted into something uglier. And here we go. Right on schedule. The dramatic exit. I'm not being dramatic, I said, but my voice came out strained because I was already having trouble getting enough air. You always do this. Every time you don't get your way, every time someone calls you out, suddenly you can't breathe. It's manipulative, Lennox. The tightness was getting worse. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to signal that this wasn't fake, wasn't manipulation, that my body was betraying me the way it had my entire life. I need my inhaler. No, what you need is to stop using your asthma as an excuse for everything. I turned toward the kitchen where I'd left my bag on the counter, where my rescue inhaler was waiting. But my legs felt weak and my vision was starting to get spotty around the edges. I made it 3 steps before I had to grab the back of the couch to steady myself. One of Davina's friends, a girl with dark red hair, stood up. Davina, I think she's fine. This is what she does for attention. Just ignore her and she'll snap out of it. But I wasn't fine. My airways were closing rapidly now, that terrifying sensation of trying to breathe through a straw that kept getting narrower and narrower. I tried to speak, to tell them I needed help, but I couldn't get enough air to form words. All that came out was a thin, whistling wheeze. I stumbled toward the kitchen, my only thought to get to my bag, to get to my inhaler. My hands hit the counter and I fumbled for the bag, my fingers clumsy and shaking. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears, could feel my heart racing as my body went into panic mode, desperately trying to compensate for the lack of oxygen. I got the bag open, reached inside. My fingers closed on empty space. The inhaler wasn't there. Panic turned to terror. I dumped the bag out on the counter, watching through darkening vision as my phone, my wallet, a pack of gum scattered across the surface. No inhaler. Where was my inhaler? I always kept it in the front pocket, always, it was my lifeline and it wasn't there. Looking for this? I turned. Davina was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding my blue rescue inhaler in her right hand. She held it up, dangling it between 2 fingers like it was a toy, like it was nothing. I reached for it, my hand shaking. She pulled it back. Davina, I tried to say, but it came out as barely a whisper. Please. Say you're faking. The room tilted sideways. I grabbed the counter to keep from falling. My chest felt like it was being crushed by invisible hands, tighter and tighter, squeezing the life out of me breath by impossible breath. The girl with red hair stood up. Davina, this isn't funny anymore. She's fine. She's done this 1,000,000 times. She just wants us to feel sorry for her. I couldn't speak anymore. Couldn't do anything except try desperately to pull air into lungs that had stopped cooperating. I reached for Davina again, pleading with my eyes because my voice was gone. She looked at me with complete detachment. Admit you're being dramatic and I'll give it to you. I couldn't. I was on my knees now. I don't remember falling, but suddenly I was on the kitchen floor, my palms pressed against the cool tile. My vision was going dark at the edges, tunneling down to a small point of light. I could hear my breath, that horrible high-pitched whistling sound, getting quieter because I didn't have enough air left to make noise. I tried to crawl toward her. My arms gave out and I collapsed fully onto the floor, my cheek pressed against tile. I could see my inhaler in Davina's hand, so close, impossibly far. Gasp, loser. You always overreact. The red-haired girl pushed past Davina. I felt hands on my shoulders, heard her voice but couldn't process the words. Everything was getting farther away, sounds muffled like I was underwater. My lips felt numb. My fingers were tingling. Her lips are blue. Oh my God, she's turning blue. Hands pried my jaw open. The inhaler pressed into my mouth. Someone pushed the trigger once, twice. I couldn't coordinate breathing in with the spray. Couldn't remember how this worked. Couldn't think through the fog that was taking over everything. Another spray. Some of it made it into my lungs. Then more. My airways, slowly, agonizingly, began to open. A trickle of air got through. Then a bit more. Then enough that the panic started to recede slightly. I don't know how long I lay there on the kitchen floor, just focusing on breathing, on the simple act of pulling oxygen into my body. The red-haired girl kept her hand on my back, kept saying, you're okay, even though we both knew I'd just almost died. When I finally could sit up, my whole body was shaking. Tears were running down my face. Not from pain, though there was plenty of that, my chest aching from the effort of trying to breathe, but from the realization of what had just happened. What Davina had done. She was still standing there, her arms crossed, looking annoyed. Not scared, not sorry. Annoyed. See? She's fine. Total drama queen. The red-haired girl stared at her like she'd never seen her before. She couldn't breathe. Her lips were actually blue, Davina. She was exaggerating. I work at my mom's medical office during summers. I know what oxygen deprivation looks like. That wasn't fake. Another friend, quiet until now, picked up her bag. I think I should go. They all left within 5 minutes. I sat on the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinet, inhaler clutched in both hands, and watched my sister's social gathering dissolve because even her friends recognized that something deeply wrong had just occurred. Mom came home 20 minutes later, grocery bags in both arms, to find me still on the floor. Lennox. Sweetheart, what happened? She dropped everything and rushed to me, her hands on my face checking my color, my breathing. She had an attack, Davina said before I could speak. She'd been in the living room but came back to the kitchen when she heard Mom's voice. It came out of nowhere. She was fine and then suddenly she wasn't. It was really scary. Mom looked at me. Is that what happened? I looked at Davina. At the warning in her eyes. At the way she'd positioned herself as the concerned sister, worried and helpful, standing there like she hadn't just held my medication out of reach while I suffocated. I thought about telling the truth. About saying she took my inhaler, that she made me beg for it while I turned blue. But I also knew how it would sound. Like two sisters fighting, like I was trying to get Davina in trouble. Like maybe in my oxygen-deprived state I'd misunderstood what happened. It came on really fast, I whispered. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but I swallowed it down anyway. Mom took me to the doctor the next day for an emergency follow-up. Dr. Reeves had been managing my asthma since I was a toddler, and she was thorough in her examination. She checked my lung function, adjusted my daily maintenance medications, asked detailed questions about what had happened. Your mother said the attack came on suddenly during an argument with your sister? Yes. And you couldn't reach your medication right away? No. It took a few minutes. She made notes in my chart, her expression concerned. A few minutes without your rescue inhaler during a severe attack can be extremely dangerous, Lennox. You understand that, right? Yes, ma'am. How did you feel during those minutes? Terrified. Helpless. Like I was dying while my own sister watched. Scared. I couldn't breathe and I couldn't find my inhaler at first. Where was it? The question hung in the air. Where was it? In Davina's hand while she demanded I admit to faking. On the floor where it fell when the red-haired girl finally grabbed it from her. In a place I couldn't reach because my sister decided my life was worth less than proving a point. I'm not sure. Everything was kind of blurry. Dr. Reeves wrote more notes. I'm documenting this as a severe asthma attack with delayed medication access. I'm also noting that you seem anxious when discussing the incident. Lennox, is everything okay at home? Yes. Because if there are stressors we need to address, environmental or otherwise, we should talk about them. Stress can be a significant asthma trigger. I thought about telling her. About explaining that my biggest stressor was my own sister, that living with Davina meant living in a constant state of low-level fear. But what would that accomplish? Would they believe me? Would it just make everything worse? I'm okay. Just still shaken up from yesterday. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push further. She did, however, recommend family therapy to my mother in the hallway outside the exam room. I heard pieces of their conversation through the door. Household stress factors, sibling dynamics. Lennox seems reluctant to discuss details. Mom's response was quieter, harder to hear. Something about normal sister conflicts, about Davina being a teenager, about how she'd talk to both of us about being more considerate. Nothing changed. The years that followed were an exercise in making myself smaller, quieter, less of a burden. I stopped complaining when Davina made comments about my asthma. I stopped expecting her to understand or care. I became an expert at managing my condition alone, at never depending on anyone else to help me access my medication. I kept spare inhalers everywhere. In my locker at school, in the garage, taped to the underside of my desk, in my coat pockets. I had backup plans for my backup plans. I would never again be at the mercy of someone else's cruelty. Davina's version of what happened that day calcified into family mythology. She told anyone who'd listen about how she'd helped during my severe asthma attack, how she'd stayed calm and got me my medication, how scary it had been but how she'd kept her head in an emergency. People praised her. Teachers, relatives, family friends. What a good sister. How responsible. How mature for her age. I listened to the lies and said nothing. What else could I do? I went to college at 18, chose a school 4 hours away, put distance between myself and Davina for the first time in my life. She went to a different university, studied marketing, joined a sorority, graduated with honors and a job offer at a prestigious advertising firm. We saw each other at holidays, exchanged brief pleasantries, existed in the same family orbit without ever actually connecting. She'd moved on to bigger things. I was a footnote in her life story, the sickly younger sister she'd heroically cared for once upon a time. I got my degree in social work. Started a job helping kids in the foster system. Found purpose in advocating for people who couldn't advocate for themselves. Learned that sometimes staying quiet isn't strength, it's just another form of suffering. I was 29 when everything changed. I got a message on Facebook from a name I barely remembered. Rowan. The red-haired girl from that day in the kitchen.
Ilanox.
I know this is completely random after 15 years, but I need to talk to you about what happened at your house that summer. The day with the asthma attack. I've thought about it every day since, and I can't keep quiet anymore. We met for coffee on a cold March afternoon. She looked different, older obviously, but her eyes held the same expression I remembered from that day. Concern mixed with something harder to name. I'm a paramedic now, she told me, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. I've been working emergency medicine for 6 years. That's great. It's because of you, actually. What happened that day, it made me want to understand medical emergencies. To be someone who could help. I didn't know what to say to that. Lennox, I see severe asthma attacks regularly in my job. I know what they look like, how quickly they can become life-threatening. And I keep thinking about that afternoon in your kitchen. She leaned forward. Your sister had your inhaler. I saw her holding it. I watched her keep it away from you while you collapsed. My coffee had gone cold. I hadn't taken a single sip. Rowan. Did she tell people she helped you? Because that's not what happened. She nearly killed you. And then I left, and I never told anyone what I actually saw, and I've been carrying that for 15 years. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I saw Davina last week at a charity event. She was giving a speech about family and responsibility, and she told that story. About your asthma attack and how she saved you. She's using what she did as proof of her good character, Lennox. And I stood there listening to her lie, and I realized I've been complicit in that lie by staying silent. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too small. It was 15 years ago. What does it matter now? It matters because she's still lying about it. It matters because what she did wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. Deliberately withholding life-saving medication during a medical emergency? That's assault at minimum. Depending on how the law interprets it, it could be attempted manslaughter. I'd never thought of it in those terms. Criminal. Assault. Legal words that carried weight and consequences. The statute of limitations. Might not apply if she's still actively benefiting from the false narrative. I'm not a lawyer, but I think you should talk to one. At the very least, she shouldn't get to keep using your trauma as a character reference. She left me with her number and a promise to testify if I ever needed a witness. I sat in that coffee shop for another 2 hours, my untouched coffee growing a film on top, thinking about words like assault and criminal injustice. Thinking about 14-year-old me on the kitchen floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come while my sister watched with detachment. Thinking about all the years I'd spent protecting Davina from the consequences of what she'd done. I didn't do anything immediately. Just sat with the information, let it reshape my understanding of my own history. Then 3 months later, Mom called. Davina's engaged. To Marcus, that lawyer she's been seeing. The wedding's next June and she wants you to be a bridesmaid. Isn't that wonderful? I felt something crack inside my chest. She's already planning her maid of honor speech, Mom continued, breathless with excitement. She wants to talk about family and protecting the people you love. About that time she helped you during your asthma attack. She thinks it'll be so meaningful. I closed my eyes. Saw myself standing in a matching dress next to my sister while she told a room full of people how she'd saved my life. Saw her using my near-death experience as the foundation for her wedding vows about devotion and care. I can't be a bridesmaid. What? Lennox, don't be silly. I have to go, Mom. I'll call you back. I hung up and sat in my apartment, my hands shaking with something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in 15 years. Not fear, not anxiety. Rage.
Pure, clarifying grage.
I called Rowan. You said you'd testify. Did you mean it? Absolutely. I need a lawyer. Do you know anyone who handles assault cases? She connected me with a colleague's sister, an attorney named Iris Kowalski who specialized in delayed justice cases. When I explained everything, she was quiet for a long moment. The statute of limitations for criminal charges has likely expired, she said finally. But we might have grounds for a civil suit, especially given that your sister is still actively profiting from a false narrative about the incident. We'd need evidence though. Documentation, witness testimony, anything that contradicts her version of events. I have a witness. Rowan, the paramedic who contacted me. That's good. What else? My medical records from that time. I had a follow-up appointment a few days after it happened. Get those records. See if your doctor noted anything that might support your version of events. It took 4 weeks to obtain my medical files from Dr. Reeves' office. When they arrived, I spread them across my kitchen table and read through every page with the care of someone conducting an archaeological dig. Most of it was routine documentation. Medication dosages, lung function tests, treatment protocols. Then I found the note from the follow-up visit. Dated 3 days after the incident. Patient reports severe asthma attack occurred during argument with sibling. States medication was not immediately accessible, delayed by approximately 2 to 3 minutes. Patient appears anxious and reluctant to discuss specific circumstances. Mother present and confirms patient was found in distressed state. Patient's reticence and evident anxiety regarding incident raises concern about household dynamics. Recommend family therapy to address potential environmental stressors. Note: delayed access to rescue medication during severe attack poses serious risk of permanent injury or death. Family education needed regarding emergency protocols. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. Dr. Reeves had documented her concern. She'd noted my reluctance to explain what happened. She'd written in my medical file, in official documentation, that something about the situation didn't add up. I sent copies to Iris. Her response came via email that same evening. This is excellent. Contemporary medical documentation noting inconsistencies and patient anxiety about discussing incident. Combined with witness testimony and your sister's ongoing false narrative, we have grounds for a civil case. But I need to ask, what's your goal? Financial damages? Public acknowledgement? What outcome would feel like justice to you? I stared at that question for a long time. What did I want? Not money, though that would be nice. Not revenge exactly, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't want Davina to face consequences. I wanted the truth to exist somewhere other than my own memory. I wanted official acknowledgement that what happened wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding but a deliberate act of cruelty. I wanted my sister to understand that actions have consequences, even 15 years later. I wanted the truth to breathe. We filed the civil suit 6 weeks later. Defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Based on Davina's continued public misrepresentation of events and the documented evidence that contradicted her narrative. The papers were served to her at work. Mom called me 4 hours later, her voice shaking with confusion and hurt. "Lennox, what are you doing? What is this lawsuit? How can you sue your own sister over something that happened when you were children?" "She didn't save my life, Mom. She almost ended it." "That's not, she was 14, she was scared." She held my inhaler out of reach while I turned blue on the kitchen floor. She stepped over me to keep me from reaching it while I suffocated. "That's not fear, that's cruelty." Silence on the other end of the line. "Why are you doing this now? Why did you wait 15 years? "Because she's still lying about it. Because she's building her entire wedding narrative around a version of events that never happened. Because I'm done protecting her from the truth." Mom tried to talk me out of it. So did several relatives who called, horrified that I would dare disrupt family peace with legal action. The pressure to drop the suit, to let it go, to forgive and forget was intense and unrelenting. But I had something they didn't: documentation, a witness, and a lawyer who believed me. Davina's attorney tried multiple times to get the case dismissed. They argued statute of limitations. They argued that childhood conflicts weren't grounds for civil litigation. They argued I was misremembering events from 15 years ago. But Iris was better. She built a timeline using my medical records, Rowan's testimony, and social media posts where Davina had publicly shared her false version of events. She brought in a medical expert who explained in clinical detail exactly how dangerous it was to withhold an inhaler during a severe asthma attack. The dismissal attempts failed. We were going to trial. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Less dramatic. Just a room with wooden benches and fluorescent lighting and a judge who looked tired before the proceedings even began. Davina sat at the defendant's table in a charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression carefully controlled. But I could see it, the tremor in her hands when she reached for her water glass. The way her jaw clenched when the bailiff called the court to order. Rowan testified first. She described what she'd witnessed in our kitchen with the precision of someone trained in emergency medicine. My blue lips, the whistling sound of my breathing, the location of my inhaler in Davina's hand, the way my sister had refused to give it to me. "How certain are you about what you saw?" Davina's attorney asked during cross-examination. "Completely certain. I've worked as a paramedic for 6 years. I've seen hundreds of medical emergencies. I know what deliberate withholding of care looks like versus someone freezing in panic. What I witnessed was deliberate. My medical records were entered into evidence." Dr. Reeves, now retired, had submitted a written statement explaining why she documented concern about household dynamics and my reluctance to discuss specifics of the incident. The medical expert Iris had hired explained asthma mechanics in terms that made even me uncomfortable. Delay of 2 to 3 minutes without rescue medication during a severe attack can result in hypoxia, which is oxygen deprivation to the brain. This can cause permanent neurological damage or death. The fact that the defendant physically prevented her sister from accessing life-saving medication during such an attack constitutes not just cruelty but reckless endangerment of life. Then Iris played the video. We'd found it buried in the depths of social media, posted years ago by a mutual acquaintance. It was from Davina's 24th birthday party, a casual gathering where someone had been recording random moments on their phone. In the video, Davina stood with a group of friends, slightly drunk, telling the story of my asthma attack. But this version, told when she thought only friends were listening, was different from the heroic narrative she shared publicly. "I swear Lennox was being so dramatic," video Davina said, laughing. "Like yes, asthma is real or whatever, but she literally used it to manipulate everyone. So when she started her whole gasping thing during my friend's visit, I was like absolutely not, I'm not enabling this behavior. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of everyone rushing around treating her like she was dying. Someone off camera asked, "So what did you do?" I had her inhaler. I told her to admit she was faking and I'd give it to her. One of my friends freaked out and grabbed it, which honestly was probably good because Lennox was really committed to the bit. Girl went full method actor, turned blue and everything. Laughter from the party guests, frozen now in digital evidence. The courtroom was silent as the video ended. Iris paused it on a frame of Davina laughing. "Ms. Davina, is this you at your 24th birthday party, discussing the incident that occurred when you were 14? Davina's face had lost all color. "I was drunk. I was joking around." "You were joking about deliberately withholding life-saving medication from your sister during a medical emergency?" "That's not, I didn't mean, it wasn't like that." "What was it like then?" "Because you've told multiple versions of this story over the years. You've told friends you were teaching your sister a lesson. You've told your family and the public that you saved her life. Which version is true, Ms. Davina?" She didn't have an answer. She just sat there, her hands shaking, all her careful composure crumbling as her own words were played back to her in a court of law. Her attorney tried to recover, arguing that a drunk statement at a party years ago didn't prove anything about what actually happened. But the damage was done. The jury had seen my medical records, heard Rowan's testimony, listened to Davina admit in her own words that she'd withheld my medication intentionally. The trial lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, the judge delivered her verdict. "I've reviewed all evidence submitted and heard testimony from multiple witnesses," Judge Peterson said, her voice calm and measured. "What emerges is a clear pattern: a minor who minimized her sister's serious medical condition, who engaged in conduct that directly endangered her sister's life, and who has spent the subsequent 15 years profiting socially from a demonstrably false narrative." She looked directly at Davina. "Ms. Davina, your actions on the day in question constituted reckless endangerment. While criminal prosecution is barred by statute of limitations, this court finds substantial merit in the plaintiff's civil claims. You have willfully and repeatedly misrepresented events in a manner that has caused your sister ongoing emotional distress while simultaneously enhancing your own reputation." The judgment was $75,000 in damages plus a court order requiring Davina to publicly retract her false statements and cease all future misrepresentations of the incident. But the money wasn't what mattered to me. What mattered was watching my sister's hands shake as the judge spoke. What mattered was the official record stating that what happened in our kitchen wasn't an accident, wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't a scared teenager freezing during an emergency. It was documented now in legal terms as what it had always been, a deliberate act of cruelty that nearly cost me my life. What mattered was that after 15 years of silence, the truth finally had a voice. After the verdict, Davina stood quickly, her attorney already gathering papers, already moving toward the exit. But she stopped. Just for a moment. She turned and looked at me across the courtroom, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Not the anger I expected. Not defiance. Something smaller, something that might have been shame if she'd let it fully form. She opened her mouth like she might say something, then closed it, turned away, left through the heavy courtroom doors without looking back. I sat there for a while after everyone else had gone, just breathing in the quiet. Iris touched my shoulder gently. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, and meant it. "I really am." Mom called that night. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up on the 4th ring. "I read the court documents," she said. Her voice was small, hollowed out. "The judge made them public record. I read all of it. The medical expert's testimony about what could have happened to you. Rowan's statement about what she saw. That video. I waited. I should have known. 15 years ago, I should have asked more questions. I should have listened when Dr. Reeves recommended family therapy. I should have seen that your anxiety about discussing it meant something was wrong." Her voice cracked. "I should have protected you better." "Yes," I said quietly. "You should have."
I'm sorry, Lennox.
I'm so sorry. I failed you as a mother that day and every day after when I let Davina's version become the truth everyone believed. It wasn't enough. Maybe nothing would ever be enough. But it was something. An acknowledgement that my experience was real, that my silence hadn't been because nothing happened, but because I hadn't been safe enough to speak. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. Is there any way to fix this? To fix us? I thought about that. About whether broken things could be repaired or if sometimes you just had to acknowledge the damage and decide what to do with the pieces. I don't know yet, but I'm open to trying. We talked for another hour. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. She asked me about the medical records, about what Dr. Reeves had documented, about all the signs she'd missed. She cried when I told her about hiding backup inhalers all over the house because I was afraid of ever being that vulnerable again. I thought I was protecting both my daughters, she said. I thought keeping the peace meant everyone was okay. I didn't realize I was just protecting one of you from consequences while leaving the other one alone with her trauma. I know you did your best with what you understood at the time. My best wasn't good enough. No, I agreed. It wasn't. But maybe we can do better going forward. Davina posted the required retraction 2 weeks later. It was brief, clearly written by her attorney to fulfill the legal requirement while saying as little as possible. I previously shared an account of an incident from my adolescence that I characterized as helping my sister during a medical emergency. That characterization was inaccurate. I did not help my sister. My actions during her asthma attack were harmful and dangerous. I regret the misrepresentation and any harm it caused. The comments section exploded. People who'd heard the heroic version were confused, shocked, demanding explanations she didn't provide. Some defended her, saying everyone makes mistakes as a teenager. Others were less forgiving, especially once the story got picked up by a few local news outlets covering the unusual civil case. Sister ordered to retract false heroism claims after court rules she endangered sibling's life, read one headline. I didn't read most of the coverage. Didn't engage with the social media discussions. This hadn't been about public vindication or destroying Davina's reputation. It had been about creating a record that said, this happened, it was wrong, and it had consequences. Davina's engagement to Marcus ended 6 weeks after the trial. I don't know if the lawsuit was the cause or just exposed problems that were already there. Mom mentioned it briefly during one of our weekly phone calls, her voice sad but not surprised. She's having a hard time, Mom said carefully. Some of her friends have distanced themselves. The firm she works for is considering whether this impacts her position, since she does public-facing client relations. I felt a complicated mix of emotions hearing that. Not satisfaction exactly. Just a quiet recognition that actions have ripples, that consequences aren't always immediate but they're still real. How's she doing emotionally? I asked because despite everything, she was still my sister. Still someone I'd grown up with, shared a childhood home with, even if that home had never been safe for me. She's angry. She feels like you've ruined her life over something that happened 15 years ago. She almost ended my life 15 years ago. I just made sure there was a record of it. I know. I'm not asking you to apologize or take it back. I just thought you should know where her head is. A year passed. Then another. Mom and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. She went to therapy to process her guilt about missing the signs of Davina's cruelty. I continued my own therapy, working through the layers of trauma and silence and self-protection I'd built over the years. Davina and I didn't speak. There was nothing to say, really. The court had said everything that needed saying. I heard through Mom that Davina eventually left the advertising firm, moved to a different city, started working at a smaller company where her past wouldn't follow her so visibly. She was dating someone new. She'd started her own therapy, though I didn't know if that was for herself or to prove to others she was working on being better. I hoped it was for herself. I hoped she'd use this as a chance to actually examine who she'd been and decide who she wanted to be. But that was her journey to take or not take. I couldn't control it, couldn't fix it, couldn't make her understand things she might never be ready to understand. All I could control was my own healing. I started speaking at medical conferences sometimes, talking about the intersection of chronic illness and family dynamics. About how medical vulnerability can be weaponized. About the importance of believing patients, especially young patients, when they say something isn't right at home. At one conference, a teenage girl with severe asthma approached me afterward, tears streaming down her face. "My brother does stuff like that," she whispered. "Hides my inhaler sometimes. Says I'm being dramatic. My parents don't believe me when I tell them." My heart broke and healed simultaneously. "I believe you," I told her. "And I'm going to give you the number of someone who can help." I connected her with a social worker I knew, someone who specialized in medical abuse cases. I gave her resources for documenting incidents, for keeping herself safe. I told her she wasn't crazy, wasn't dramatic, wasn't making it up. I did for her what no one had done for me at 14. And that felt like another kind of justice. 3 years after the trial, I was at a coffee shop when I saw Davina. Just chance, random collision of paths in a city of hundreds of thousands. She was in line ahead of me, ordering something complicated with extra foam. She turned with her drink and saw me. Froze. For a moment we just stared at each other. 3 years of silence, of separate lives, of all the things that had been said in a courtroom and all the things that would never be said anywhere. "Lennox," she said finally. "Davina. I didn't know you were back in town. Just visiting Mom for the weekend." She nodded, shifted her weight, looked like she wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. The coffee shop bustled around us. People ordering and chatting and living their lives completely unaware of the weight of this accidental encounter. "I'm sorry," she said abruptly. "For what I did. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, and I know it's years too late, but I'm sorry." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But she just looked tired. Older. Like she'd been carrying something heavy and had finally put it down. "Okay," I said. "Okay. I hear you. I accept your apology. I don't know if that changes anything between us, but I hear you." She nodded slowly. "I've been in therapy. Working through a lot of stuff. My therapist says I was a narcissistic teenager who saw you as competition for our parents' attention and resources. She says I dehumanized you to justify being cruel to you." "Sounds like you've been doing some work." "I have. I really have. I know it doesn't change what I did, but I'm trying to understand why I was capable of that. Why I could watch you suffocating and feel nothing." I took a breath. Felt my lungs expand and contract, easy and natural, the way they'd learned to work with proper medication and management. "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I appreciate you doing the work anyway." "That's fair." She clutched her coffee cup. "Mom says you're doing good work. Speaking at conferences, helping kids with chronic illnesses." "Yeah. That's good. That's really good, Lennox." We stood there another moment in awkward silence. Then her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, grateful for the escape hatch. "I should go. But thank you. For not just walking away when you saw me. Take care of yourself, Davina." "You too." She left. I got my coffee and sat by the window, watching people pass on the street outside. I felt oddly peaceful. Not because we'd reconciled or because her apology had healed 15 years of damage, but because I'd faced her without fear, without that old instinct to make myself smaller. I'd reclaimed something in that courthouse 3 years ago. Not just my right to the truth, but my right to take up space, to demand accountability, to refuse to protect someone else at my own expense. The truth could breathe now. And so could I. That night at Mom's house, she made dinner and we ate at the kitchen table where so much had happened so many years ago. The room had been remodeled since then, new counters and cabinets, but the bones were the same. "I saw Davina today," I told her. "At the coffee shop on 5th Street. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "How was that?"
Okay, actually. She apologized. I don't know if it changes anything, but it was something. She's been working really hard in therapy. I think the trial, as painful as it was, might have been what she needed to actually confront who she'd been. Maybe. I took a sip of water. I'm glad she's doing that work. But she's doing it for herself, not for me. I can't make my healing dependent on whether she becomes a better person. That's very mature of you. It's very therapy-ed of me, I corrected with a slight smile. I've had a lot of help learning to separate her growth from my recovery. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. For taking the lawsuit forward even when everyone was pressuring you to drop it. For standing up for that 14-year-old girl who wasn't protected the way she should have been. I didn't go to court for revenge, I said, echoing words I'd said to Iris years ago. I went so the truth could breathe. And it did. It does. Every time I share my story with a medical professional or a teenager struggling with chronic illness in an unsupportive family. Every time someone reads that court record and understands that medical abuse is real and has consequences. Every time I take a full, easy breath and remember that I survived not just the attack but everything that came after. The truth breathes. And so do I. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the lawsuit. If I wish I'd just let it go, moved on, kept the family peace. They ask if the money was worth it, if the public exposure was worth it, if destroying my relationship with my sister was worth it. I tell them it was never about money or exposure or destroying anything. It was about building something. Building a record that said this happened. Building a precedent that said actions have consequences even when delayed. Building a foundation for my own healing that wasn't based on silence and self-sacrifice. I tell them that sometimes the only way to move forward is to first stand still and say, this happened, it was wrong, and it mattered. The truth needed to breathe. So I opened the windows and let the air in, even though it disrupted the careful climate control everyone else had been maintaining for 15 years. And yes, it was worth it. Every difficult conversation, every family member who stopped speaking to me, every moment of doubt in the middle of the night. It was worth it because I'm not that scared 14-year-old on the kitchen floor anymore. I'm the woman who stood up in a courtroom and said, I matter. My life matters. My truth matters. And the judge agreed. I still carry an inhaler everywhere I go. That hasn't changed. But when I reach for it now, I don't feel that old panic, that primal fear of it not being there or being withheld. I've built a life where I control my own medical care, where I've surrounded myself with people who understand that chronic illness isn't weakness or manipulation, but just part of who I am. I've built a life where the truth can breathe. Where I can breathe. Free and full and without apology. And that, more than any verdict or judgment or financial compensation, is what justice feels like. Not rage or revenge. Just oxygen flowing freely, lungs expanding fully, the simple miracle of breathing without fear. The truth needed to breathe. So I let it.